We want to welcome you to this Educate and Elevate webinar that we're hosting today with Dr. Jeff Williamson. My name is Angela Mori. I'm with the Kankakee County Chamber of Commerce, and we're partnering with the Manteno Chamber of Commerce and the Kankakee County Convention and Visitors Bureau. So we're glad to have you on board with us, and I'll have Sarah with the Manteno Chamber introduce our speaker today.
All right, just give me 1 minute here. Okay, sorry for those technical difficulties. I have the honor to introduce Dr. Jeff Williamson today. He currently serves at Olivet Nazarene University as the Executive Director of Corporate Engagement. He's a graduate of ONU, and he holds a master's in communication and a doctorate in educational leadership. In addition, he's certified in fundraising management at the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy at Indiana University, and was a postdoctoral student at the Ohio State University Fisher College of Business. In 2017, Dr. Williamson founded the CMG Group that provides executive coaching, training, and people development. He is a Gallup-trained strengths coach and leadership consultant to higher education, business, and industry. So with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Jeff Williamson, and I believe you are all in for a great treat because his presentation looks outstanding. So welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate it. And thanks for the introduction and those kind words. First of all, I want to say I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this conversation and to talk to you about this topic. I do recognize that everyone's time is precious. And so I don't take your presence on this call lightly. And it's an honor to have each of you with me today. So we all know that strengthening communication and trust is a work in progress, right? So we don't perfect it, but we're always working on it. And no matter how well we've developed these important traits, there's always room for improvement. And I can tell you at the head of that line would be me, because I always need to get better on these things too. So here in a second, we'll jump into the content, but I also want to just quickly say on the next slide, what I see as my why and how I seek to serve others with all the different things that I do. So there are 4 words there that you see, and those are really at the heart of what I do and what I try to provide for people. I'm a speaker, I'm a teacher, a trainer, and a coach. And obviously there could be others, but that's really what it boils down to, is what I try to do for other people is often delivered through those kind of pathways. So as we look at today's topic of strengthening communication and trust, I just want to reiterate how important those are in our lives, whether it's personal, work, etc. Okay, so let's just jump right into the next slide, and I'll begin kind of walking you through some of the topics. So I always like to offer some things that will be takeaways or outcomes that I hope you'll have from the seminar today. And I'll also, near the end, give you opportunity to take a couple of minutes and do some specific action steps for yourself that you can do right away. You know, sometimes as we think about, things that I want to work on, if we don't write them down and really prioritize them quickly, we can kind of let it slip, and then later on it's like it wasn't even there. So in a couple places here in a few minutes, I'll walk us through a couple of different scenarios, and I'll give you multiple times to provide some input. That will be in the form of poll questions. We'll also have some times where I'll ask a question or two of you and have you type responses into the chat section. So these are the things here that I hope will be of use to you when you look at what am I going to do, or what are my takeaways from this session today. Is I want it to be real life. I want it to have some things that you can use right away and build into some personal goals for yourself. So when we talk about communication, it's a wide spectrum, right? So there are times that we all need to have some crucial conversations. And we're going to talk about these three keys just here shortly, about how our communication can really be more meaningful and productive, which is really what I hope we want. So first of all, you see there, start with the heart. I think we know that usually there's more to a situation than what meets the eye. And if I approach a person first with an open heart and an open mind, that really helps. And that will have a lot to do with that conversation going well. The second thing there is to ask yourself, what is it that you really want? In this scenario, if it's a crucial conversation, it may be that you're experiencing conflict and you really want to have less conflict, or maybe you want more information shared, more transparency. It could be a lot of different things, but letting that person know and thinking even ahead of time, if you have an ahead of time to a conversation, is what do I really want to take out of this? What do I really hope to accomplish from this conversation? So as much as we tend to sometimes act like it, nobody's a mind reader, right? So if we don't ask people or have a conversation with them, they're not necessarily going to know what we're after or what we need from them. So my words of advice there would be clear, but be kind as well. That's always a good possibility. And then you see there, the third thing is creating safety. And I'm not talking about, physical risk or harm to a person, but just when the communication tone and the dialogue gets aggressive or gets unsafe, you want to avoid that, obviously, at all costs, because that's not going to go the way you would want it to go. So this quote here is from Joseph Grenny, who is one of the authors of a book called Crucial Conversations. And one of the cool things in there is that they give some very hands-on, real-life kinds of things to think about. So I want to read just a couple of paragraphs to you. That's a case scenario, if you will. And it may be different names and different categories, but it could sound like something you face recently, maybe even earlier today. I hope not. So listen along, and then I'll ask you some questions and give you an opportunity to respond after I share this. So here we go. Kendrick is an administrator for the Department of State. He made a decision to make some modest changes, in his opinion, to the work schedules of his team and rolled it out without much advance notice. And he just assumed it would be a routine, no big deal. Not so much. One of his employees was very upset and felt that they had been singled out or even punished by the changes in schedules. So she and Kendrick met to discuss this situation, and it did not go well. Kendrick felt attacked personally, and he confessed he lost his cool. The employee left the meeting abruptly, and nothing good was accomplished. Okay, sounds familiar maybe sometimes. So here's what Kendrick did. He gave himself a little bit of time to calm down and realize, okay, we need to try this again. He reached out to that employee another day, asked her to come in for a second meeting to sort things out. Unfortunately, this one went even worse. And things wound up with both of them upset and the employee leaving, mentioning that there may be legal advice or an unfair work practice complaint coming. All right, so let's pause there. Not a good situation, right? Not fun. We probably have had some kind of a scenario go like that at some point in time. So I want to see what your thoughts are and what some of the things are that you might tend to have similar outcomes, at least on the front end. So our first polling question is going to come up, and you see the question here, and you'll have an opportunity to respond to these 5 categories. What is the most common topic where misunderstandings happen in the workplace? And you can pick from any of those 5. You'll see that the 5th one is just kind of an open category. I'm sure there are other things that have come up in that way. And if so, you can address those in the chat box, and we'll take a look at those once you have time to respond. So I'll give you 20, 30 seconds to select your choice there, and then just hit submit. And here in a little bit, we'll see the cumulative events on the, or the cumulative outcomes on this. So go ahead and think it over a little bit. Sorry, I forgot my Jeopardy music for this segment. All right. If you're torn with indecision, we'll give you about 5 more seconds to punch in and then hit submit. And then Sarah, I think, will be able to show us some cumulative results, which should be interesting. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And let's see what you had to say. Okay, interesting. So that's interesting. It is. So here's what I'm saying. Interesting. I did this seminar last month, and the number one thing that came up in that one was individual work schedules. But this is a different day, different crowd, and that one didn't come up as an issue. So work assignments, 48%. Employee reviews, 24%. Deadlines for project completion, 19%. And then the others were added in the chat box. And what were some of those, by the way? I didn't happen to have those rolling up. So I think we're tracking those a little bit, and maybe get those in a second here, okay? I wanted to pull my chat box up and not advance the slide. So let's see, there we go. Okay, yeah, I didn't have chat open, my bad. So, okay, got it. So a couple things, promotion or advancement came up, and those are definitely some interesting things. So let me just pause there, and I'll come right back to the screen share, but just want to give everybody a chance to check in and see who all's here. Fun. Awesome. It's the first time I saw all the groups of people that are in here, so welcome. Good to have you with us. And I'll jump back into screen share and be thinking also on our upcoming poll questions. We'll have another one of those, as well as some chat dialogue. So when we come out of the discussion of our friend Kendrick, again, we talked some about crucial conversations, and there are 3 particular ones that Grinny highlights here, and I think we'll probably be familiar with those. And Grinny calls them 3 clever stories. So the first one he identifies, I'm sure you've never seen this, is someone is the victim. Oh, they're shocked that someone would think anything like that of them. I'm such a good person. How could you think I would do a thing like that or say a thing like that intentionally? If you picture Winnie the Pooh and Eeyore, he's always depressed and just kind of shuffles around. That is kind of the visual response of someone who takes on the victim role when there's a conflict, like what we saw with our friend Kendrick. The second one is the villain mentality, and that is turned more toward the other person. So this can include something called fundamental attribution error. And in plain language, what that basically means is that we assume our words, intentions, and motives are pure as the driven snow. And that other person, well, they're just evil, right? Ever been caught in that one? That's an easy trap to fall into as well. And then the third one that he talks about is for them to just kind of be helpless. What can I do? I guess I just have to take the punishment, take a beating, be silent, hope someone maybe rescues me. I'm just powerless in this situation. And though I say those kind of lighthearted, but we can all tend to fall or lean into some of those sometimes when we're the target of criticism or attacks or even untruths that are shared about us. Now, obviously, there are other options that could be responses, but these are really easy to fall prey. So next time you find yourself in the midst of a misunderstanding, just remember there's probably some degree of blame for all of us, and that we may not be as clear on our intentions or what we're trying to do as we think we are. So these are some ways to keep in mind that we can be a victim, villain, or helpless. So then one additional case scenario, I mentioned that we'd have that. And then in this next one, we'll, rather than the poll, just want to have you jump into chat and give some examples from your experience. If we have any HR managers out there, God bless you. You get some of this. Sometimes you'll recognize this. So Greer is an HR manager. She coordinates the annual review process for her plant. The software they use is a new system, and it's been a little glitchy at times. And if people don't stop and save their work along the way, it's not sometimes like just throwing them out and not saving their work. And you have to start all over. Not a good thing. So she sent an email out to all the employees, giving them a heads up that this had been happening and to be aware and to make sure and save everything as they go along. Well, a few days later, one of the employees came into her office complaining that his input information on his annual review had closed out and he had lost all his information. Guess he didn't get that email, right? Didn't mean to miss it, but hadn't read it. Well, she explained that there'd been a glitch, and if they don't save it along the way, it can be a problem. Well, he grew very angry when he realized that all his information was lost. He stood up, expressed how he felt, and cursed at her loudly and said, "Why didn't someone tell me this?" And just basically stormed out of the room. Now, her decision then was, how do I respond to this kind of an attack? So how about you? Does it sound familiar? Ever been there? Have an issue kind of blow up on you and someone just really goes all out verbal attack? If so, did you ever choose any of these three traps that we talked about? Or did you choose a better option? Now, here's where I want to hear from you. And that is jump into the chat and give me some examples. Give me some feedback on these of how you responded. No names, please. How you responded, and hopefully better ways that you handle these kinds of difficulties that you have encountered. So I'll give you a little bit to, jump in the chat and share some of your experiences with us on this particular item. And it's okay to just put a phrase or two or a couple of 3 sentences just to kind of give us the idea. And we'll see what percolates up to some of the things that you have dealt with and maybe some scenarios that help solve it. All right, I'll give you just another second or two. And if you think of scenarios along the way that were like this and how you solved them, you can pop those in the chat section as well. We'll have some other opportunities for you to comment in chat. And here shortly, we'll have one more poll for you as well. All right, let me look here. Sorry. I'm anxious to show that next one. I guess I keep hitting that. Okay. All right. So let's move right ahead from the Greer scenario and talk a little bit about really what is kind of the second part of this that I want to transition to. One of the most powerful books that you'll ever read, in my opinion, is by Viktor Frankl. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. And it was written, I don't know if you can see in the tiny print at the bottom, it was published in 1946. See, Frankl had spent, I think it was like 1.5 to 2 years in multiple Nazi concentration camps. He was a trained psychotherapist, so he came in clearly with training and filters to, even as a person who was there himself as a prisoner, he still was seeking, as you can imagine, to help and encourage people. And as he did, he watched to see how people responded to the difficulty that they were in. He saw many die from disease, of course. Many he described just simply gave up and shut down and eventually died thereafter. He stated in that situation, however, as horrible as it was, that the only freedom they had left was their freedom to choose how they would respond to what was happening. Now, my guess, any of you that are parents, you've maybe used a version of that to say you can't control what other people say or do, but you can choose your response. You can choose your own attitude. Lord knows my kids have heard that one preached, but it's true. So he gave examples in the book of how having, and you'll see these here in the model, having self-awareness, using their imagination positively, picturing a better future, and holding on to their conscience and their values, that made a difference in those who survived, those who actually endured and came out of this and had that freedom during and after this horrible experience. So I wanted to transition with that because when we think about, well, how much can I control, or am I going to be the victim, or am I going to be casting someone as the villain? We do have this freedom to choose and decide what it is that we're going to do or how we're going to respond. And that is a part of trust, which is what we're going to talk about here in the next session. Not only do we have freedom to choose, but those who made that choice created a measure of freedom, at least in that situation. So here in the next few minutes, I want us to focus, and we'll talk about ways to build trust and some of the impact that can have. And so buckle your seatbelt. We'll head here into the next section. And I want us to talk about a couple of different points of research of folks that have really studied this. One of those you see there in the slide is Frances Fay, and she is the Harvard School of Business. And the 3 things that she has identified that are critical to building trust are there: authenticity, logic, and empathy. The way that she describes it is that if any of these 3 are missing, trust will crumble. In her words, she talks about trust wobbles. So if someone makes a commitment or says they're going to do something, then they don't deliver, she calls that a wobble. Meaning it's not like one time devastates and destroys all trust, but that it can create some difficulties, and we have to have an awareness of when we are having a tendency to wobble. And so she says that those three things are key. And we know authenticity. I think we're all drawn to others, drawn to ideas that really express that uniqueness to that person or that organization. And then the logic piece. She said it wasn't just that people need to be authentic, but if they're willing and able to think through situations and with you in a logical way, and then to have empathy. We all need empathy. I need more empathy, Lord knows. And that's a part of how we make others feel. So authenticity, logic, and empathy, according to Frances Fay, are really big keys to building trust in our relationships and building trust in our organizations. So that brings us then to our next poll question here, and Sarah will help us with that. Take a look at this, and this one's just a rating. And the results are cumulative, so no danger there of responding 100% honestly. What is the current level of trust in your current or most recent workplace if you're in transition? What is the current level of trust in your organization or your most recent workplace? 5 is excellent, and you see on down to 1 being not good. So take a second, please, and respond, and then hit submit. And I'll give you a little bit of time to think that through if you need that. And then here in maybe 20 seconds, we'll have Sarah post the summary of these. So tell us what you think on that. Great. I'll jump back on these shortly, but there's some good comments here about communication and some ways that we can help to do that better. And I'll share those here because there's good ideas in there as well. All right, thank you. So good. According to our results, 47% say trust is excellent. That's not the norm. If you look at global numbers and national numbers, 35% say it's good, 12% is average. None of you felt it was below average, and a few of you said not good at all. It's really poor. Well, I don't have to tell you that the trust levels in teams and organizations and even in individual relationships is critically important. I think it's the foundation to everything we try to do together, really. Couple of good, not just a couple, several good comments here in the chat about some of the ways to help bringing in a neutral party. That's a good idea in that situation, to have a third party, maybe a friend from HR, come in and kind of help us walk through that. Another one, good suggestion, just stay calm and ask clarifying questions. That's another good one is, and often, and I would throw this one in, when we're feeling under attack or we're feeling kind of stressed, we don't realize we can tend to talk faster because we are stressed. So just consciously slow down as we're asking those good clarifying questions. And yeah, definitely, Stacy, good point that email and text communication can definitely be a place where we get confused or things can escalate. So a good rule of thumb, if it's just basic logistics, hey, I'll be here at this time, or can we meet there? Those are usually pretty safe on text or email. If something even has an outside chance of being conflictual or a stressful conversation, that's probably better not done in text, not done on email, because then it kind of goes, oh, I can't believe you said, oh, well, you said, and it can just escalate, right? So we don't want that to happen. So thanks, cool. That's good news that we're almost half of us feel like we have excellent trust levels in our organizations. That's something to really, really feel good about. Now, I want to dig a little deeper on this topic of trust. And here's where, okay, are we crack the, get loose, get those hands ready, because this one is all chat discussion. So first off, I'd love to hear from you. What strengthens workplace trust? Lots of you said it's really good in your workplace. So what would be some things that really help with that? So I'm going to start with the good things, and then maybe here in a minute or two, we'll shift to the other one about ways that can damage trust in the workplace. So take a second, if you would, and jump on the chat and just give us some short examples of when, like you might say, someone listens to me, or my boss cares about me, or my coworkers care about me, things like that. What would be some of those kinds of things that really strengthen workplace trust for you? Okay, so we'll see you in the chat. Go ahead and jump in there and start giving us some good ideas, because I know you have some, and we're just dying to hear. So I see you, Josh. You're getting ready. Fire up. When things go well and we feel trust, what drives that? What helps you feel like you can trust your team or trust those in your workplace? Also, I would say, I meant to mention this earlier, but in these spots like this where there is some chat discussion, if you're not so crazy about using the chat feature, I think we have it set up so you can unmute your mic and comment. Is that true, Angela? Do they have, if they want to say something specifically, that they can just unmute their mic and we'll be able to have them speak? Sometimes that's the case and not always. So not, okay, gotcha. All right, guys, so the chat it is. Hi, Sarah.
Jeff, I went ahead and let people unmute themselves if they want to respond.
Perfect. Sorry, I forgot to mention that earlier. Yeah. So if you've got a thought on trust and how we can do that, jump in. We can go Brady Bunch here and hear from some of you. Anyone have some thoughts on building trust?
This is Stacy.
Hi, Stacy.
I'll always talk, right?
Likewise.
Yeah. When I started with the CVB 4 years ago, I think just the employee morale, there wasn't a lot of trust there from top to bottom. And so I think just having an open dialogue with employees, with key partners, I think that is just such an incredible way to build trust. It also helps people understand that you value their opinion. One of my employees had never had a performance review.
Yeah.
And so I think even just for employees to hear what good works that they're doing is really incredible. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of like with the conflictual situation we were looking at earlier, is when people can, and some of you mentioned, to just ask those clarifying questions, have that conversation. And so when it comes to a performance, or how are you feeling about the new structure or the new team, or how do you love your work, or are there ways we can improve your work? We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but those are super important. Please don't assume, like Stacy said, that everybody's had a healthy performance review and they have a weekly or every other week sit down with their supervisor and communication's flowing. Sometimes it is, sometimes not so much. Yeah, thanks. So other thoughts on ways that you can build trust in the workplace. So what things that work for you may just be something like this, to say, I get a coffee with my supervisor every 2 weeks and we just catch up and make sure everything's clear between us. That's a way to build trust. Any other thoughts on those?
This is Josh. I'll throw this out there.
Yeah, hi Josh.
Kind of building off of what you said, doing weekly check-ins is a big thing.
Mhm.
Just kind of, you know, we've worked remote since I started the company, and it's
Right.
really hard to run a remote company if you don't trust people, right?
Oh golly, yeah.
My
sure.
philosophy has been from the beginning that we're all adults. I'm not going to treat you like a child. I'm going to treat you like an adult, and I'm going to trust you to get your job done.
Yeah.
So having those check-ins, you know, weekly, going through the projects that they've worked on, where they're at, having, you know, open communication is really important. We use chat for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So just
Sure.
checking in where they're at on our project, things like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
And just having that, you know, ability to just talk to them about whatever's going on, and they feel the same backwards. If there's an issue between them and somebody else,
Mhm.
you know, they feel comfortable bringing it out and talking about it, because, you know, I've tried to create that type of environment to just have that communication and say, hey, if there's an issue, even if you come to me and then I broker the exchange, we need to have this conversation.
Right. Don't let it linger, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
The worst thing that I've seen is if you don't talk about the problem, people will misinterpret your intentions. And
Yeah.
before you know it, it blows up into this big thing, and it was never meant to be that.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Gosh, if
Most
I
people
ignore
are
it, it
good.
doesn't go away, right?
Right? It doesn't go away.
No.
Can't ignore it.
Yeah. Who knew, right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there can be, you know, the opposites of these good examples can damage workplace trust. But are there other things maybe that come to mind that you just say, you know, for me, if I feel out of the loop, or if I don't have that regular contact, would there be some other things we haven't mentioned maybe that would be things that are they're kind of trust breakers for you as well? Any thoughts on that?
I have one.
Okay.
Is when my coworkers and especially my supervisor, if they don't do regularly what they say they're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are times I understand, you know, when circumstances happen
Yeah.
where changes might need to be made. But if it's just kind of their general way of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, not seeing the results, not being confident that they are going to do what they say they're going to do,
Right.
my trust is just blown.
Yeah. So it's like, I think we all could stand some, you know, some grace from time to time, but at the same time, if we see, wow, this is pretty much a pattern of someone not coming through in the ways they said they would, that can be a trust breaker. Yeah, for sure. Any others? Examples that either strengthen trust or damage trust in the workplace? Okay. Well, let's move ahead then. On this next slide here, you see I've gotten some information from this. It's a great article called The Neuroscience of Trust. And I'll spare you the depth of it, but it's fascinating. The author is a neuropsychologist, I think. And so he actually studies brain activity and monitored the different kinds of things that impact trust, both in the positive and the negative. So I'm going to give you kind of the flyby view of the 8 variables. So fear not when you see 8 things, you're like, oh Lord, I don't have 2 more hours. No worries. So the article, if you want to look it up, I'll give you the references at the end too, but it is in Harvard Business Review. Really, really fascinating article. And here on the next slide, you see what those are. And I'll just briefly click through those and give you a quick example and just comment a little bit on those. And we'll come back to these 8 steps for strengthening trust near the end as a part of your action steps. So you'll see these one by one and in summary down the home stretch. And I didn't say, but Angela, I'll share this slide, or the slide deck with our friends at the Chamber and the CVB, and I'm happy to have these sent out to all of you. So sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier in case you were getting writer's cramp taking notes. So here we go. The first thing on this list, and again, some of these are intuitive, but it helps for us to be reminded of those. We can strengthen trust with our team by recognizing excellence. And by that, I don't mean, and Zach here in the author, the article author, doesn't mean just that every day, all the time, generic, way to go, you're awesome. I mean, I say those words to people as well, but I really try to make sure that they've done something really well or awesome. And so and the other key is do this as much as possible in the moment. If you just closed out a great event or a campaign or whatever, and it's kind of that punctuation point at the end, be sure to give gratitude and recognition to those who deserve that about really doing an excellent job on that. So be sure and recognize that excellence. The second one we might not think about as often, and that's induced challenge stress. Now, when I first looked at this, I thought, do I want to induce stress in my team? But here's the thing. What they're suggesting here is not pointless, unnecessary drama or anything like that. But, you know, sometimes we'll talk about a stretch goal or something to say, wow, we're going to really have to have things line up and have a great next quarter or whatever to meet that goal. But let's go for it. And so there's that opportunity to create some aspiration, to create some excitement, to put a stretch goal or a challenge stress to see, hey, who can top out our sales process, or who can make the most calls or whatever on those kinds of things. But get the team working together toward a goal that really is not an easy thing, but is also possible for them and not a crazy impossible idea. So inducing challenge stress can bring that team together. And oddly enough, that can impact trust. Now, the third one here is you give people discretion. And I didn't set Josh up to mention what he just shared, but that was a perfect example of him having a remote team. And he has to trust his team because they're in different places, right? And so he can give an assignment to someone and say, I'm not going to tell you how to get from A to Z, but here's the end product and here's the timeline of what I need. Get ready and go, right? So you give that person some space in there to figure things out. Like he said, they're grown-ups. They know how to do this. And then if they don't, give them that opportunity to say, now, if you get stuck, let me know. We can talk, we can touch base, right? Again, strengthen communication, strengthen trust. So this work from home dynamic that most of us, not all of us, most of us have lived with in the last couple of months has really put this to the test in a lot of ways. The next thing that Zach talks about in terms of building trust is this idea of job crafting. And it kind of fits in with the idea of discretion, not just saying, well, you can do whatever you want, but perhaps we look at the next quarter and say, okay, we've got 3 different projects that we need to get done. And when it's possible, talk to your team and to say, hey, this, your strengths seem like they might be aligned with project A or B or C, and just talk with your people and create those expectations of how they'll be evaluated, what the measurables are, and then try to have some flexibility there, even in their job assignments from month to month or quarter to quarter. The next thing that Zach talked about, and again, this goes back to good communication strengthens trust. You look at this stat here from his research, sharing information broadly, only 40% of employees report they're well informed about their company's goals, strategies, and tactics. Uh-oh, that's not really good, is it? How can we work together, come together, be successful together if almost 2 out of 3 of our team don't understand our goals and how we plan to get there. So we may have good intentions, but we've got to be clear, almost over communicate, and checking back in frequently to make sure that your team and your organization and your constituents have the information they need. Now, obviously we can't share everything with everybody, but you understand what I'm saying, is that we can share needed information with the team. And I think that is really a key. So the next one, and we know this, I think we all know this, is that one of the foundations of relationships is trust. And so we've got to be intentional about building relationships. Any of you that know me know that that's really something that I love. That's something that's a part of my work. It's something that's a part of me, is that by building those relationships, other people know they actually matter to you. And when you can be a supervisor or a peer that's working together with someone, and you know they know that they matter and that you care about them as a person, not just, oh, you got to crank something out this many by the end of the month, and that's the end of it. Build those relationships, because people will work differently when they're in situations that are positive and that there's trust there. A 2017 Gallup study that, again, is in the references. They every 4 years do a study called the State of the American Workplace, and they asked, this is a global study, they asked 12 questions of literally millions of people globally. And the questions were related to employee engagement, employee retention, and they wanted to find out what were the most important indicators of engagement, of satisfied employees. And of all the things that could be out of that study, here's the phrase, this is word for word, this is the phrase that people responded to. That was the number one outcome. My supervisor or someone at my work seems to care about me as a person. Relationships. You get it. You understand what I'm saying. I'm preaching to the choir. So relationships are super important. And then finally is to facilitate whole person growth. I think as a culture, as companies, we've come a long way in a positive on that, understanding that our workers are not just widgets. They're not just, individuals without feeling or emotions or trust. And so you see here that the importance of high trust workplaces, that they see them as a whole person. They aren't just vested in what do you do for the company, how fast can you do it, or how profitable. That matters. We've got to pay attention to that. But there's also that important piece of, are they healthy? Do they have a strong level of wellness outside the workplace? And those kinds of things that contribute to this whole person growth. That's why we do team development. That's why we do offsites sometimes. That's why we meet up in smaller groups, because we want to stay connected with our people and make sure they know that they matter, and that you care about them as a human being, not just the work that they can do. So that's a quick flyby of those 8. But are you ready now? We're going to look at the summary of these, and I'm going to give you an opportunity here in the last few minutes to think about what you would like to do. Oh, how could I forget this one? This was not the last one. The last one is show vulnerability. Boy, we all love that one, don't we? This can be one of the tougher ones, right? Is showing vulnerability. But that goes back to the trust piece, right? We can open the window, if you will, a little bit and share a little personal information in an appropriate way when there is a foundation of trust, when there is a strong communication and culture, okay? So that's actually the last one. Sorry about that. Now, in the next slide is the one that I was referring to. And this is where I want you to just take a minute or two and think about these. And I have the side-by-side with these 8 foundations of trust. And you can look at this list And maybe there's just a couple of those that really resonate for you, or that really activate your trust in the workplace, in your family, or whatever it might be. And so just take a second and maybe jot down and think about the top 2 or 3 items from this list of 8 that are really important to you. And then the next thing is to think about, remember accountability, that was something that came up earlier. Are there coworkers or friends or mentors who you could say to them, hey, I really want to work on giving people on my team more discretion in the next month. And I would ask you to help me be accountable of that. Can I just like update you each week in the next month on the ways that I'm doing that? And we just really give people permission to say, hey, how's that going? Are you doing that thing that you mentioned a few weeks ago that was pretty important for you? So a couple of things that are important to you with trust. Think about someone who can help you accomplish that. Really just be a peer mentor maybe. And then finally is put a date to it, right? Because if we have a goal without a due date, it's simply a wish, really. So put a due date on that. Think about those things that build trust for you. Share that with someone, and then put yourself on a sequence to get there. And you can work along the way. And then when you get to the finish line, you can say, hey, how did I do? Did this make a difference? Did this help? I think it probably will. So finally, if you would like to connect with me outside of this format, you see there my email, my website for CMG, and then social media. I'm active there. And if you have questions, comments, you'd like to learn more, anything like that, just reach out and be happy to talk to you. So with that, I would throw it back to our lovely hosts, and I'd be happy in then 2 or 3 minutes, maybe, if we do have questions, if anyone wants to raise some questions on any of these topics just before we wrap up the hour.
Jeff, I just want to say that I think, over communication in both the workplace and at home or in personal relationships is probably the way to go. I think that we can all definitely take something away from that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if you think about when there are communication breakdowns, how often do we hear from people? I didn't know that. Nobody told me. How am I the last to know, right? That happens in my house too. And the key to that, I think I'd rather fall on the side of someone going, yeah, you told me that a couple times. I'm like, okay, good. I just want to make sure everybody's in the loop. Nobody feels left out or unimportant. So yeah, Angela, you're definitely right. That's a key. Any other comments, thoughts, or questions here in the home stretch?
I don't think so. I think, Jeff, I just want to thank you so much for sharing this lunch hour with us today.
Thank you.
I think, I know I personally got a lot out of your presentation and a lot of good points to think about moving forward. So I really appreciate that. And all of our attendees, I think on behalf of the Manteno Chamber and the Convention and Visitors Bureau, we're pleased to have you here. And
thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Enjoy the sunshine.
Yeah.
If there is any by you.
Have a great day. Be safe, everybody. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for helping out too, Sarah, on the polls.
You're welcome. I was glad to help.
See, it just pops something up along the way to kind of help people refocus, I
Yeah,
think.
I really liked it. I definitely will be considering using those in the future because it
Yeah.
increases the engagement, but then it helps get an understanding of um, your audience too.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ones that I was doing last week for ATD was, I mean, a lot of you guys know I do a lot of stuff on strengths assessment and talking about, strengths in the team. And, that particular one, they had linked up with like 5 other chapters of ATD. So we literally had St. Louis, Detroit, Chicago, Northwest Indiana, Columbus, Ohio, Central Ohio. And so, there was a good number of people. So when those poll results came in, they had really a lot of people responding. And so it was so helpful too, to me early on. I think it was the first few slides, I said to them, now I'm going to be talking a lot about strengths, but I don't want to assume that all of you have taken the assessment. And so my first poll question was, have you taken it, or have you heard of it but not taken it, or 3, you've never even heard of it? Well, right out of the gate, it was like 67% said, I've taken it.
Yeah.
Like, cool. Okay. That helped me modify as I go along that
Sure.
most of the people knew what I was talking about.
Yeah, I
I
really
think
like
it just
it.
helps.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
it's like
you.
on the fly feedback. So
Mhm.
yeah, thanks for taking care of the mechanics of it. I appreciate it.
Hey, of course, happy to do it. But
Thanks.
all right, well, thank you so much again, and have a great
All right.
rest of your day. It looks like the sun's out, so go out and enjoy that.
Yeah. Yeah. I hit the patio.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you later.
There. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody. See ya.